네, 안녕하세요. 김원장 인사이트입니다. 오늘은 아이브즈가 CNN 유튜브 방송에 출연하여 간세가 이코노믹스 아마겟돈이라고 말하는 뉴스를 기억하실 텐데요. 아이브즈는 여기서 테슬라와 애플의 현재 상황에 대해 본인의 의견을 말했습니다. 최근 몇 달 동안 일론 머스크와 그의 기업들이 겪은 브랜드 손상과 그로 인한 경제적 영향, 그리고 향후 전망까지 얘기를 나눴습니다. 먼저 인터뷰 내용을 요약 설명해 드리고 나서 이전과 같이 유튜브 영상을 끝까지 함께 보시겠습니다. 영상에 중요한 내용이 많으니 끝까지 보시기를 권장드립니다. 먼저 일론 머스크가 최근 몇 달간 자초한 정치적 및 브랜드 손상에 대해 이야기해 보겠습니다. 머스크는 정치적 발언과 정부 효율성 부서 관련 활동으로 인해 테슬라의 브랜드 이미지에 큰 타격을 입혔습니다. 몇몇 분석가들은 이 손상이 일시적인 문제가 아니라 지속적으로 영향을 미칠 것이라고 경고하고 있습니다. 이 손상의 영향은 유럽과 미국에서뿐만 아니라 중국을 포함한 전 세계적으로 나타나고 있습니다. 중국 시장에서 테슬라의 매출 비중은 매우 크고 이 시장에서의 하락은 전체적인 수익에 큰 타격을 줄 수 있습니다. 그뿐만 아니라 머스크의 정치적 활동이 테슬라의 브랜드 신뢰도에 부정적인 영향을 미치고 있다는 평가가 많습니다. 투자자들은 이러한 변화에 민감하게 반응하고 있으며 테슬라의 주가가 하락하고 있습니다. 실제로 주식의 목표가가 하향 조정되었으며 이는 머스크의 활동이 기업의 미래에 부정적인 영향을 미칠 것이라는 우려에서 비롯되었습니다. 하지만 테슬라는 여전히 전 세계에서 가장 중요한 기술 기업으로 앞으로도 기회는 존재한다고 보는 시각이 많습니다. 애플은 또 다른 큰 기업으로 관세 문제와 중국 의존도에 어려움을 겪고 있습니다. 최근에는 관세 문제를 해결하기 위해 인도에서 아이폰 생산을 늘릴 계획을 발표했는데요. 이는 애플이 중국의 의존도를 줄이기 위한 전략 중 하나입니다. 하지만 생산을 인도로 옮기려면 수년이 걸릴 수 있고 그에 따른 비용 또한 소비자에게 전가될 수 있습니다. 테슬라와 애플 모두 현재 중요한 전환점을 맞이하고 있습니다. 테슬라는 브랜드 회복과 글로벌 시장에서 경쟁력 강화를 위해 빠른 결정을 내려야 할 때입니다. 애플 역시 중국과 인도 간의 균형을 맞추며 관세 문제를 해결하려면 전략적 재편이 필요합니다. 요약하자면 테슬라와 애플은 둘 다 글로벌 기술 기업으로 큰 기회를 가질 수 있지만 브랜드 손상과 정치적 이슈, 그리고 생산지 이동 문제 등 여러 도전에 직면했습니다. 여러분들은 어떻게 생각하시나요? 이들 기업이 앞으로 어떻게 이 위기를 극복할 수 있을지에 대해 여러분의 의견을 댓글로 남겨주시기 바랍니다. 영상이 마음에 드셨다면 좋아요, 구독 버튼 눌러주시고 더 많은 콘텐츠를 원하시면 알람 설정도 부탁드립니다. 지금부터 인터뷰 영상 전체를 함께 보시겠습니다.
Political damage that Musk has self-inflicted between Doge and obviously everything we're seeing play out, along with the Trump administration, I believe it's destructed demand 20% in Europe, 10% in the US, and that could be conservative. And I think that's something that's also starting to show up in China, which is ultimately, look, if you look at our new estimates, it's really taking a huge haircut to what China growth is going to look like. The second thing is when you look at the tariff's a headwind. There's no way to sugarcoat it. And the reality that a U.S. car company makes cars in the U.S. with all U.S. parts, that's a fairy tale. That's a Pinocchio story. And I think for Tesla and for Musk, it's a moment of truth. Because you can't be 3% CEO, 97% Doge. And the brand issues, it's created Tesla into a political symbol. Mm-hmm. And that is a very, very bad thing, and I think it speaks to what's happened in the stock.
Do you see any hope that image could be turned around? And I ask that not so much in terms of what Musk can do, but maybe the question that investors are going to start having to ask is whether the company just needs new leadership altogether.
Look, I mean, in the next 4 to 6 weeks, he makes a choice. You step out of Doge, you literally now back to CEO of Tesla. He could still be some sort of, official, unofficial advisor, whatever it may be. But the reality is then the brand damage would be contained. It would be stitches, a black eye.
Will it though? Because it's on him. I mean, it's not just people saying, oh, we think Tesla's a bad car. They're looking at the CEO and they're saying, we think you're, from not my words, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi. This is a taint that you just don't scrub off overnight.
And I don't think you scrub it all. There's no way that you scrub it all. Like I said, there's a permanent brand damage that's here. But here's the key. You continue down this road, then that permanent brand damage, it becomes something much bigger.
Yeah.
And the shame is that, and it's, look, the reason we kept the rating and didn't downgrade is because I believe, along with NVIDIA, two of the best disruptive technology companies in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: this is a fork in the road. Like
To borrow a phrase from him.
For Musk,
Yeah.
now to make the right decision.
Maybe email him with that as the subject line and see if he replies. Hey, I do want to get to some breaking news. Apple plans to source more iPhones from India over tariffs. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that. I want to go back to Tesla, though, and talk about China a little bit. Xiaomi, BYD, the technology that those car companies have, among other car companies in China. You spend a lot of time traveling around the world looking at this technology. Do Americans actually understand how innovative Chinese homegrown EVs are?
No. And actually, it almost speaks broader to even some of the issues that we talk about in terms of like tariffs, the concept that we can make things here in the U.S. Look, China, when you look on the EV side, I mean, China's really front and center.
Because that seems like a huge headwind for Tesla.
Well, especially when it comes to BYD in terms of, because think about it, right now, BYD, they're going after Europe, South America, aggressively going after the rest of the world. At a time where Tesla, this should be the time that it's go time, that you're going after the rest of the world. But the political damage, the brand damage that Musk has done, self-created, it's hurt that issue. So my whole point is that the longer term for Tesla, it's one of those moments where its future will be determined, a lot of it, how Musk handles the next 30, 60, 90 days.
But this is still a company that gets pretty much half of its revenue from outside of the United States. A big chunk of that was in China, at least based on the numbers at the end of last year. So if China goes, or at least it starts to wither to a much smaller percentage of sales, can he make up those sales anywhere else around the world? No.
No, I mean, that's why it's the hearts and lungs. There's no... and also, like, when you look at what's happened in China, and we've talked about it over the weekend, all the issues with tariffs and everything, China, what does it do? Drives buy more domestic, BYD over Tesla, Huawei over Apple. It speaks to the broader issue that a lot what's happened here is that the companies that take it most on the chin will be Tesla and Apple.
But with Tesla, just one last question on Tesla, though, what's the alternative? If I'm shopping for an electric vehicle, and this was the advantage Tesla had for years, really, was there really wasn't an alternative, and not a viable alternative. Now, I know there are a lot more vehicles out there, EV vehicles out there, but not necessarily at the scale of production that Tesla has.
No one could really even
or the
compete.
pricing that Tesla has.
And look, and that, but it speaks to what's so frustrating about what's going on. If this was Intel, look, these are disasters relative to like, okay, is it the stock, is it cheap or fall knife? Tesla, it's about the massive opportunity ahead. But what Musk is doing in terms of, it's a self-inflicted wound that needs stitches, now surgery, and that's our whole point. It's like, you got to make the decision.
Let's get to Apple. Shares of Apple right now are lower by about 4.2%. You cut at your price target on the stock to $250 from $325. I want to start with the headline that we're getting from the Wall Street Journal. The company plans to source more iPhones from India as a potential fix for tariffs. A big part of your note has to do with exposure to China. Maybe in the first Trump administration, this would be news that investors would cheer because, okay, well, India hadn't been hit with tariffs. It was between the U.S. and China during the first Trump administration. With global tariffs, does anything matter?
But that's the whole, I mean, think about Vietnam. You move to Vietnam, Vietnam's worse than China. And then like when you talk about India, it would take years to even make that more than 5%, just given the logistics and the nature of India, in terms of as Apple tries to move some stuff there. Look, no company in the world is hurt more from once that came out of Trump's mouth in terms of Taiwan and China tariffs than Apple.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about 90% of iPhones are made in China. And the reality, and even over the weekend, well, we got to make it in the U.S. Here's the deal. If you want $3,500 iPhones, we should make them in New Jersey, maybe make them in California. If you like $1,000 iPhones, you make them in China. Well, and that's just the reality.
Well, it raises the question, too, is whether Apple really would try to move. I mean, do they have enough pricing power where if they have to raise the cost of an iPhone by 20, 30%, I mean, I don't know. They've convinced people somehow to pay $1,000 or more for it already.
But that'd be massive demand destruction. And look, and my whole point is that it would take tens of billions of dollars. To even move 10% of the supply chain, that would take 3 years. So that's why the reality right now, what's going on in terms of tariffs and the reaction, investors look at it like it's untenable, and it would be an economic Armageddon to U.S. tech industry. In my opinion, it would set U.S. tech industry back a decade.
Wow.
Do you think the White House understands the economic Armageddon?
Look, I think it's easy to stand in front of a microphone, and I get it. Politicians talk. The reality is when you spend time walking through fabs in Taiwan, Foxconn in terms of China, you spend time there and then you come here and you actually think, given our labor force, manufacturing costs of labor, that we're going to make that here. That is just, in my opinion, it's massively unrealistic, and that's why it just speaks to what's happening with stocks. Because investors, they're not. This has nothing to do. Republican, Democrat.
Yeah.
Investors know math and the reality.
Yeah. And I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here, but with regards to Apple and its ability to find some transition through all of this, is there a way that they could maybe increase sales outside of the U.S.? And I bring that up because Tim Cook was just over there in China for that big meeting. He obviously toured a lot of other facilities and universities. For some reason or another, he seems to have a relatively decent relationship with the Chinese government.
10%
and
politician,
its economy.
90% CEO.
Yeah, and he's done it right. He navigated the first Trump administration, and I do wonder if maybe we're counting him out, that he might find a way to navigate through this.
Look, the $500 billion they announced, is that getting some sort of exemption here and there? Look, and that's something that like, investors are holding out for. But the reality is, if you want a body blow and an uppercut and cut the knees off of the, in my opinion, probably the best technology stalwart in the world in terms of Apple, this does it.
Forgive me, Dan, I want to go back to Tesla because I'm getting a question from a viewer right now who says that Elon's brand damage has been evident for months. Why did you just downgrade the stock as a result of this?
No, it's a great question because I believe from everything we're seeing in Europe and the U.S. and deliveries going into 2Q, that it went from something that was containable, 5%, to something much broader. And I believe it was also our view that he'd hold the line, start to step back. Instead, he hasn't. So the point is that brand damage, when we model that out into 3Q and 4Q, that's us basically modeling out what we believe the brand damage is going to do to the next few quarters.